Thank you, Anubhav, for joining us today for the Design Story series.
Thanks, Kritika, for having me. I hope you and your family, your teams, and our viewers are all keeping safe and well at home.
Yes, we are. It's just that now everyone has been working from home only. So we have decided to work from home till December, just to be making sure that everyone be safe, especially in Bombay. We have to take those measures.
Yeah, we're pretty much doing the same thing, but beyond the point, I think it becomes slightly difficult because we're in the business of making real estate. So there's only that far you can go working from home. But fingers crossed, I hope this is over soon.
Yeah. So Anubhav, I really wanted to know, could you tell our viewers about your background and how long have you been involved in sustainable architecture?
Sure. So by training, I'm an architect, urban planner, and a real estate economist, whatever that means. And I've had the privilege of being educated in many different places: India, the US, the UK. I've also had the opportunity of working, living, learning, teaching in a lot of interesting cities. So Delhi, Boston, London, Hong Kong, and most recently Mumbai. So so it's been a very exciting journey. Your second question was about sustainability.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I'd say that as a family we've always been very conscious. When I was much younger, I remember my father would say, if you don't put off the lights when you leave the room, I'll cut pocket money. And we were always taught not to waste, and just basic middle class values. And my formative years in education as an architect, I think we were exposed to amazing faculty members that had either taught or practiced or learnt cutting edge ideas around sustainability, and they imparted that knowledge to us. And I got interested in it fairly early on in architecture school. I'd say about second or third year. And again, I had the opportunity in my fourth year where we have a internship program. It's like a work experience program. Yeah. So I had the opportunity to work with a very famous architect in England by the name of Michael Hopkins and Partners. Who was cutting edge, was doing net zero developments. So I had the opportunity to go there to learn all of that, to bring that knowledge back. I used some of that knowledge in my graduate thesis, which was on the Delhi Metro, which was being built in Delhi at the time, which was well received. After that, I worked some. I decided to go overseas to study more on sustainability. So I went to the US for a master's degree in building technology and sustainability. I stayed on, I taught there. I went to practice after that. I took a break again, where I thought I knew less about money, so to study land economics. Wow. And I returned to India about, I'd say, 8 years ago to work for Godrej, where I founded the GPL design studio. I run the business for the redevelopment of our lands in Vikhroli, and quite excitingly, our CSR and sustainability portfolio for the company.
So because of that great journey which you had in embarking on sustainability, tell me, what difference did you notice when it came to sustainability in design in global market and India? Like when you would have stepped into the Indian market, did you see the sustainability as a focus area being involved in India?
I was fortunate enough to come back and work with Godrej. So Godrej as a company has always been keen on sustainability. In Bombay, for example, we've been in Vikhroli for about, I'd say, almost 100 years. And, the family has been, stewarding the upkeep of the mangroves and making sure things are done in the right way. And, even at the group level, at the company level, it is something that I was fortunate enough to see. As far as the industry goes, I think it's a mixed bag. I found that certain companies who had the value set, where they felt that sustainability is a responsibility, should be base hygiene. I think those companies were making, were making leaps of faith and trying to stay ahead of the curve. They were learning from the West. I'd still say it's not mainstream.
Right.
But what's heartening to see is that a lot of the customers, the end users, are now asking these questions, and there is a demand for this. So I would imagine that these things would pick up. There are certainly things to learn from the West, but I think the application in the Indian context is what would make it interesting and exciting.
And especially in the real estate sector, do you see other developers? Because what we have seen is very few, still in numbers, as you said, end user is asking about these things, but the developers are still not yet into that, going ahead with the sustainability design. So what's your take on that?
Well, I think sustainability and ideas around sustainability work best when all the stakeholders are able to come together and do their bit. So let's break this down, right? Who are the stakeholders? So let's say the end user is one stakeholder. We are finding with the millennials that they're asking the right questions. They care about where their water is coming from. They care about waste. They care about where their waste is going. And we see a demand for such services or such planning measures coming up. On the developer side, like I said, I'd say the larger corporate players who have been looking at sustainability as a triple bottom line sort of thing, who have been reporting on it, are looking at these things. So, I would say us at Godrej, I'd say folks like the Tatas, the Mahindras, Shapoorji, Palonji, these large groups are looking at it. In fact, I think a year or a year and a half ago, we built a consortium of like-minded developers in order to be able to trade practices. And what was heartening to see is that we were coming up against the same kind of problems. And it was a really nice open format to share these practices, to try and do something for the industry. Other developers, I think, are following suit, albeit either slowly or their learning curve is high.
Yeah.
From the government point of view, I think again the government is also trying to encourage this, right? So we're seeing things like Miyawaki forests and other such things become part of regulation. Even for the MOEF, if you look at the kind of things one has to do, it is similar to IGBC ratings and so on. But I do think again that the government could do better in making incentives, helping approvals, perhaps provide tax breaks in doing so. The investor community is an interesting one. They are, especially the foreign investors and institutional investors, they are quite keen on this because they've realized that from, in the mid to long term, these measures protect their investment, enhance capital appreciation, and so on, right? So although we are seeing this more in the commercial space in India, I would imagine that this would happen more depending on how investment is structured in the future. Architects, planners are of course have always been yelling from rooftops, saying we should do this. But again, I feel that they need to look at a wider framework than just buildings per se, but more a systems approach over a life cycle. And the media is helping a lot in trying to bring this message to the masses so that all these stakeholders come together.
So do you think the basic or the main challenge other small developers or even the medium level developers are facing with the cost? Because I understand sustainability has a long-term effect and it requires that kind of bandwidth and the investment. So maybe because of the cost-wise, the developers are not thinking, the awareness-wise, they are not much being told about it. Like, where do you feel the challenge is maximum coming for these developers?
It's a myth. The cost problem is a bit of a myth. And, when I first came to India, this is what I heard as well. And one of the things that we did was to actually isolate and find out how much extra does it cost to do a green building, right? Now, a lot of the stuff you do in any case, if you hire decent architects, if you plan the building right, those are base hygiene things. We found that roughly you spend 2 to 5% of the cost of construction, depending on how far you want to take your green building, let's say from base rated to platinum rated.
Right.
And that is not a very significant cost, right? Of course, I'm sure that it may pinch certain developers. It may not pinch other developers. We've been doing it because we think it's the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Also, a lot of these things are now part of the regulation. So anyways, you would do them, right? Now, I think where the challenge lies is we as developers put in this infrastructure and we give it to the customer. The real benefits accrue in the usage of this. So that part of the equation is not monitored. Now, if that part of the equation is monitored, one would see the payback of all of this. So not only do you break even, but it's a really big win-win proposition. I always use the analogy in India, when you go out and buy a car, the first question you ask is, kitna average degi? Right? Why aren't we asking this about our homes? Our homes, most likely we'll live in them for 70, 80, 100 years. And if that logic or that equation is built properly, one would be able to show to the customer that, look, even if we were to pass the cost to the customer and say, look, you are going to pay 5% more, but look at it over, say, 70 years. You're going to not only break even, but you're going to actually make money on this because your electricity bills are going to be lower. Your resource use is going to be optimized. So I think that argument needs to be made. And I think people will sign up both on the developer side as well as on the customer side.
So which of your project would you consider has been exceptional with regards to, sustainable high performance design?
Again, that's like choosing which is your favorite child out of many children. I think for us, it is base hygiene. So, about more than 90% of our portfolio is green. The rest of it, which isn't, our old projects, which we are hoping we will retrofit and we'll make 100% green. We were also founding members of the IGBC, right? For us, any project that we do is going to be at least silver rated, if not gold or platinum. We are trying to get to the next level to say that any project we do should at least be gold, right? Like I said, we've been looking at the environment for a long time. At the group level, we run something called the Good and Green program, where we want to be a water positive, carbon neutral company. We want to minimize waste to landfill. If I were to take some examples, and this is just a generic example, I wouldn't say these are favorite projects or, but just to give you an overview, we are working in Bangalore, for example. Now in Bangalore, there's a major water problem.
Yeah.
One of our sites, beautiful site, everything is great, except there's no water. There's no connection of water even from the government. It's only, it's going to happen after a while. Now, we can just go ahead with the planning process and just figure it out and say, okay, it's going to be somebody else's problem, whoever's going to live on it later, Of course, we don't take that approach. So, right from the due diligence, we will get involved and we will figure out if it is a problem we can mitigate responsibly, only then we will go into the development. So we hired the best folks, to help us to study the land. We were able to find on that particular piece of land that, we could recharge groundwater in a big way. And all the strategies we used for early planning, kind of informed how we would go about developing that land. And it's really funny because when the first time the land came, our teams looked at it, we sketched some bits out. And then after that, when we did the research and what came out of the research, it was quite different actually, where you can build, where you cannot build, where it's best to, collect water, recharge, so on and so forth. So like that, it helped us also understand how these things work. And for us to say, okay, this can be mitigated. You're not going to be dependent on tanker water and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Let me give you another example. In NCR, there's a major problem with air quality.
Yeah.
Right. So we said, well, is there a way for us to mitigate that problem? Now, it's very hard because internally you can still mitigate it. So we worked with our MEP teams and, we said, if you can have central air conditioning, why can't you have central air purification? That was an easier problem to handle. But what do you do outdoors, right? Again, we innovated with few manufacturers. We figured out how to put in air purifiers outdoors. We figured out what kind of vegetation, things like that. Whatever little we can do, right? And you probably would have heard of these projects, Godrej Air, Godrej Aqua. An example closer to my heart is at the trees in Vikhroli. All our buildings are platinum rated. When we did planning of the site, we saved about 85% of the tree cover, which was already a lot. Now, bear in mind, this is quite hard to do, right? Because where you've got trees, you can't put a basement under it and put a basement on top of it, or a building on top of it, sorry. And you've got FSI, you've got all kinds of things that you need to manage. By the time we finished with this development, we would have planted about 20 to 30% more on the same base as far as trees go. So we would have left the site greener than how we found it. And it was already quite green. Now look at the benefits. We did an air quality study and we found that air was at least 30% at an average cleaner than the rest of Mumbai. Now, how do you put either a price to it or a quality to that, right? When you want to come here, move here with your family or come to work here, that is something which is, we had these old structures on the site, which we could have demolished and just sent to the landfill. We decided to do adaptive reuse. So perhaps this is one of the first times, at least I know of, as a developer, that we adaptively reused materials and the building. Again, it was well received. The project's called the Imagine Studio. And, again, it was the first for us. We weren't sure how to do it or what to do, but in doing so, we know now that, we can do this. We piloted an urban farm. We said that, look, you make all these green spaces and it's a lawn, fine, people can use it, but can the landscape be productive? And we piloted it, we tested it out with our customers and they loved it. So now, in fact, during COVID, I'd say maybe 10 or 15% of the vegetables, herbs at the trees are coming from the urban farm. So, the residents don't have to fully depend on outside, So like that, we are looking at many things. And one more point to mention here is we are focusing on what happens once we hand over the project to the customer. Right? I think that's very important because nobody shows you how to use these features that one is put in. So we're looking at things like piloting a sustainability manual, right? Now imagine, I don't know, you buy a equipment, a vacuum cleaner or something. You get a manual how to use it, right? So we're looking at those things. We are looking at partnering with home automation companies. Instead of just doing mood lighting and switching things on and off, we are asking the question, can the automation tell us how much water, how much electricity we are using? What is this costing us? How much should we be using? What we can do to make it better? So, if the customers use this in the right way, then that part of the equation, which demonstrates the benefits of it, becomes clear. And we can then show that to the industry or to other stakeholders and say, look, this really works.
So don't you think when 5G comes in the market, these are the technology which will actually will keep in mind for the customer also, like how you said, such automation, smart home automation is happening in Western world already. A lot of equipments, a lot of, like how you say about the temperature and everything is already there being executed in the home. Under the construction, when you buy a new home, everything comes full equipped. So do you think it's going to get implemented soon, such technology, or is India still going to be a bit back when it comes to buying such smart home automation homes, as you say?
No, I don't think it's about being backwards or forwards. I think the Indian consumer is a very smart, value-conscious consumer, right? Trends and frills last only that long. The moment you can demonstrate value, I think the Indian consumer is one of the first, to pick up on this. Now, home automation as an infrastructure, technology as an infrastructure exists already. It's about coming in and developing these type of things to be able to show by measurement, for example, how much water you're using, how much electricity you're using. I'll give you an example. There's a plug available in the market for 1,500 rupees, which if you use as an intermediary between your air conditioner and the socket, you can control by your telephone. It'll tell you how much you're using for electricity. It'll tell you that if you put your AC on for 2 hours, it costs you this much money.
Right.
You can program it to switch it on and off during the day or the month or whatever. And by extrapolation, you could say that my energy cost or my electricity cost is going to be this at the end of the month, right? It's not rocket science at all. So
Right.
once these things are available, I think the Indian consumer will take to it very quickly.
But Anubhav, cities like Bombay, where the real estate prices are always soaring high, right? Comparison to other markets in India. So smart home automation will always, obviously, once it comes in the picture, it will also increase the price of the home, right? So do you think Bombay market will we be seeing developers not saying that, okay, we have provided you these smart home automation equipment, so this is because of that, of course the reasons which you said, the light, electricity, everything will be saved, but this is the cost which will come to buying the house.
So again, and the home automation piece doesn't cost a whole lot as compared to because a lot of this infrastructure is dependent on your 5G network, and so the hardware isn't that expensive. My view is also that it has to do with a long-term payback or a medium-term payback kind of a thing, right? Why would somebody buy a Honda over another car? Because they know that the average is going to be better, the efficiency is going to be better. So I don't see that as a problem. I see the first step as a stepping stone to show that this can be done or this will be done. Developers are providing home automation system as part of basic stock now, right?
Yeah.
You see your whatever touch screens and things like that. So it's not something, now it's using that infrastructure to become more intelligent.
Right.
And I don't think the cost is going to be a main concern. Also, in cities like Bombay, again, an example. I used to live in London for a long time. In a building, there are two apartments which are exactly the same. When you rent an apartment in the UK, the real estate agent shows you what the rating of that apartment is. Essentially, it's a sustainability rating.
Yeah.
Now, let's say those two apartments are exactly the same. One sustainability rating is better and the other one's worse off. And a lot of this has to do with the equipment that's in the apartment, right?
Yeah.
You will notice that the rental of the one which is better is higher than the one which is not as good. But when you do the math over a period of time, the market is efficient.
Right. Yeah, everything, keeping your electricity, water, everything will obviously make the cost go down.
Correct. So I think that is where we ought to be in India, hopefully in the near future.
So going back to the project Vikroli, I really wanted to discuss on that. Like during the lockdown, there's been a lot of people hashtagging, Godrej house and everything with the view and all, because during the lockdown, they're enjoying the most of it because the view is good. Greenery is there, fresh air is there. So what was your idea behind when you saw the land, that this is how you want to go ahead? What was the process behind? I really need to understand, because when the project was launched, I remember I really loved the project and I really wanted to buy a house. But the way it was selling as a hot cake, what was the thing behind this project that this is how it will be? And it actually sold, because people, as we discussed, there is a market where people want these kind of things to be given, which will give them a long-term, be profits or long-term sustainability, like how we discuss on this.
Yeah, again, and some of this is I don't know if we can take credit for it, but when I came here about 8 years ago, the piece of land was pristine. Essentially, we own this land. A lot of our industries have been based on it. Like any sort of brownfield development, which used to be out on the outskirts of the city. Today, Vikhroli finds itself in the center of Mumbai because the city has grown like that. Now, we were shifting our factories outside, and there was an amazing opportunity to redevelop this land. And again, the privilege here is that in cities like Bombay, it is very difficult to get clean, contiguous parcels of land, right? You might get small bits of land which you could develop as buildings. And so typically what happens is you end up only thinking about the building and not, the space between buildings.
Right.
When I moved here, one thing I missed most about the West was the quality of public realm was very bad. We didn't have sidewalks, we didn't have crosswalks, we didn't have, a lot of greenery and so on. So here was a great opportunity to do that. When I looked at the site, the thing that strikes you about Vikhroli is it's amazingly green.
Yeah.
So, you don't want to come along and kind of destroy that. So you got to figure out strategies where you are able to preserve the green, but at the same time, as a developer, you are able to maximize on your FSI potential and things like that. Right? Of course, the Eastern Expressway helped because at the time it connected Vikhroli. So, in about 40 minutes, you could get to BKC, you could get to South Bombay and, the airport. So as a location, it was great. The way we went about master planning it, we said, firstly, preserve the green as much as possible, right? We worked very hard on that, and we maximized that strategy. It took a while. What's great is the owner promoters, the family members were really keen that we do that because it's very easy to say this, but to actually put your back behind it. We also found that this site has been historic. I mean, the Godrej Group has been at the center of Make in India for a long time. People associate Vikhroli with Godrej, right? And we had these old kind of buildings and old, structures here. So we said, why demolish them? Can we keep them as reminders of the past, of the legacy of the group, and adaptively reuse them? Why don't we reuse materials and things like that? So we said, okay, preserve the greenery, preserve some of this, but make it new. And then we said, again, because we have contiguous land, we said, wouldn't it be nice to do a mixed use development? Now, in India, doing a mixed use development is never easy because, the building code says this is residential, this is commercial, this is whatever, right?
Yeah.
Also, when you mix it up, it confuses authorities. You have to go and explain and you have to do things like that. So we said, wouldn't it be nice if this was a place where one could live, learn, work, play? So you could have office, you could have F&B, you could have people who live here, you could have something civic, cultural, you could have hospitality, and that's how we thought about it. So we conceived this in sort of, the trees is conceived in 3 sections. You've got the residential quarter, which is phase 1 and 2. You've got on the other side, the commercial quarter, which is Godrej 1 and Godrej 2, which Godrej 1 is our headquarters building. And in the middle is the actual mixed use where you've got a hotel. We have a large park in the center where we are planning possibly Mumbai's or India's only public art sculpture park. And there's a residential building. And we said, look, we will not only look at buildings, we will look at the space between buildings. This is a place where any stakeholder can come out from indoors to outdoors and have choice. You could meet a friend for a cup of coffee. You could go and, do a art appreciation or painting thing. You could walk to work. You could enjoy a meal with your family after work. If and at the time we were looking at the urban farm, and which we made, said, wouldn't it be nice to have farm to the table? So these are ideas that we kept on building with the trees, and very, very pleased, very happy to see it come alive. What is interesting is it has attracted the kind of people who appreciate this
Yeah.
And like you said, we were fortunate. The first 3 weekends of launch, we were about 75% sold out.
Yeah.
Um, and 90%, we do some surveys, and typically end users to investors tends to be about 50-50 in a development. For us, almost 80 to 90% said that we are end users. That is a very good sign
Yeah.
for any developer or any development. So, it works quite well as a prototype. Of course, there was learning along the way. Of course, there were mistakes. Of course, but by and large, I would say that, we've been fortunate, and all the stakeholders came together, and very thankful to our customers.
No, it's definitely a very beautiful planned township. And I think Godrej created a benchmark that after that, I've seen so many townships coming in where they come up with these rainforests. And there's so many tags to make people understand we are also doing the sustainability design. We are also bringing more greenery. Because as you said, when there's a land, builders tend to do is give more of buildings in that land and consider a small in between a park given. So as I said, when I saw Godrej Township, I think I'm not just saying it because I've personally visited it. And I thought this was one of the best projects that has come up in India, where they have kept in mind, as you said, the old buildings as well, providing that kind of space for people to walk, keeping in mind there will be a joggers, there will be athletes, there will be a senior citizen. So everything, all those small details were taken care of, which I think was very rare to see in a township like that. So as I said, I'm not simply saying it. I really wanted to buy a project, but it's beautifully planned. It's really
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And look, a lot of this, and we stay away from trends. And the idea here is to put ourselves in the shoes of our customers, right?
right.
And just look at what we want. And it's only about being thoughtful. You're going to do the effort. You're
Yeah.
going to spend the money. You're going to sell the real estate. If you're thoughtful on the way, right, I think it makes all the difference. So there's no secret sauce, as it were, right? It's only about taking the time to invest in the customer, taking the time to figure out what they want, and then just keeping at it and doing it till the last mile delivery.
So I want to know, do you think regenerative design should become compulsory in India? Like in the Western world, you must have had that exposure. It's already been happening for a long time.
I stay away from this compulsory kind of a thing, right? Because anytime anything becomes compulsory, right, people find ways around it to circumvent it. I'll give you an example. When I came here, I was very heartened to see that, in order to get building approvals by the MOEF, you have to do all these things. When I looked at the IGBC, it was similar, right? So I thought, this is great. Even if you don't do an IGBC rating, all developments will become green. Yeah. Sadly, what was happening was, so the MOEF, in their good wisdom, said, if you're building, kind of tick boxes these things, you will get ahead in the approval, queue.
Yeah.
Now, everybody wanted an approval, so everybody did it. Now, the IGBC rating system happens in two parts. One is pre-certification and the other one is certification. Pre-certification happens when you're designing the project, and certification happens when what you've designed is verified. Yeah. So a lot of the developers, in order to get in the queue, ahead in the queue, were pre-certifying the buildings, but were never certifying the buildings, right? So it's called greenwashing. So I feel anytime things become compulsory, it becomes a challenge. You can use carrot sticks and sermons, but until all the stakeholders don't work in a market efficient way, I think these things will not work, right? I mean, we talked about different stakeholders. We talked about the end user. We talked about the developer. We talked about the government. We talked about the investor. We talked about the architects. Now, all of these people have to do their bit, and it has to be market efficient. And again, going back to the analogy of the car, right? Kitna average degi. There's a reason why the Hondas and the Toyotas beat the American cars, right?
Yeah.
So I think bits of it could be regulation, but once the market is efficient, once people see what the benefits are,
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone doing their bit, and ideas around regeneration, ideas around the circular economy, all these things, I think, will become commonplace.
So what I've noticed in few countries, even in Singapore and everywhere, biomimicry in design has been coming up like not just a trend, but a detailed study of the nature form and creating that in the building as well, so that it be energy efficient. You understand how that nature or that particular design has come in place, and you make it accordingly, and you enhance your building accordingly. So what do you think of biomimicry in the design, and do you think it can be the next movement? Can we see that happening in India?
I'm one of the skeptics. So look, nature is a great place to look for inspiration, right? Nature is very intelligent. It has a way of turning waste into food, survival of the fittest. It has a way of balancing ecosystems. The ideas of circular economy all come from nature. Uh, Imitation of nature is something that has been done or is being practiced, and biomimicry in design is something similar.
Yeah.
Um, I'd say that it's at a very crude level right now.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be more science, technology, um, uh, you know, material research around this to actually figure out and to actually see if one can mimic nature to that extent,
Yeah.
where one can get to the circular economy and things like that. Until then, I think these are ideas and analogies which designers use,
Mm-hmm.
and they go far, but not very far, right? The
Yeah.
danger here is a lot of it tends to become, with designers, and I include myself in that fraternity, very aesthetic. You see something that looks like it's amorphic in nature, and I use that as an explanation. And if you go and find out how it truly works, it may not always be true. But that's not to doubt the intent of the designer, right? So I think it's in early stages of thought and work. The analogy goes only that far. But I think we should stay tuned to look at these systems. And there are lots of lessons one can learn from nature to be able to apply to these, design in general. The caution I would say is, don't look at it as a building design. Look at it as a life cycle. Nature looks at everything as a life cycle.
Yeah.
Right? So the production of real estate, the product, the use, the reuse, the responsible disposal, and repeat. Now, if one is able to look at it from that perspective, I think the analogy might go further.
Agreed. No, so I agree. So in global market, architects are earlier architects used to collaborate with culture collaborators, right, to understand the culture of that particular city or that country. But now they are collaborating with the scientists to understand more in terms of biomimicry in the design and how it can be more efficient, not just to make the aesthetically wise beautiful, but even how it can be efficient for the customer or for the long-term usage. So you see this trend because, as I said, in sustainable design also, there be so many minute details where architect can be limited, but when they collaborate with scientists, you can come up with more new ways to, conserve the energy. So do you think in India we have started that trend? Because lately or recently, I think the culture collaboration is still happening. It's been always happening, but with the scientists, I think we haven't touched upon yet.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kritika. Architects in India, I mean, this is my critique and have being educated here, tend to be a little bit in their own bubble. I think, there are so many areas for architects to expand their influence in. Of course, science and technology is a big one today, right? And I see this happening in the West a lot more. So today, architects, urban planners are using big data. are using a lot of technology to be able to scientifically inform trade-offs and decision making in design to be
Yeah.
able to cater to customer needs better. So that certainly needs to happen in India. I think it's not that it's not happening, but I'd say it's not mainstream
Yeah.
yet. The other piece is that architects and designers have tended to stay away from, the math of it or the economics of it, right?
Yeah.
And I think again that's an area of influence. Have someone who was educated as an architect, now working with the client side. It's not rocket science at all, right? It's basic math. And I think architects could be doing better to be able to understand this side of things, and it'll help them look at the entire life cycle so as to present their creation a lot better.
Yeah.
You see, in architecture school, when you have these juries, right? So where you present your design, and a lot of the conversation is about design because a designer is talking to another designer.
Yeah.
We have to remember in the world outside, a designer is almost never talking to another designer. A designer is talking to a customer, is talking to the government, is talking to an investor. So I think that language needs to be learned.
Right. I agree. So where do you think the movement is going when it comes to Indian architecture and design?
I am actually quite heartened with the level of talent in our country. When I came back after 12 years overseas. When I left, it was quite different. Not to say there was less talent or whatever, but there was a certain generation or type of talent. These days, it's amazing. So from a small firm to a large firm, amazing innovation is being done. And I was very heartened because I moved over to the client side to make a bridge because I spoke the language, the architect's language, and to be able to induct them into the process so that we were able to innovate, work with the best in the industry. So we'd set up the GPL design studio. And the reason we did that is normally, as a developer, you fill up, when you tender out for a project, the RFP says you can only get this job if you've done 5 of such jobs of this size and so on and so forth. So we didn't want to do that. We wanted to work with the best available. So whether it's a 5-person firm or a 500-person firm. So we were successful in doing that. I also find that a lot of designers are now going out and getting themselves educated, whether in the business sphere or other specializations which are more applied to come back and then practice architecture. Yeah. So that's been very heartening. I've been less involved in India on the teaching side, but I think we could do a lot more work as far as the design curriculum goes. I think it's a bit dated. Mm-hmm. Today, technology and a lot of the ways that we live life have broken down traditional boundaries. I think similarly in creative education, whether it's architecture, design, whatever, the boundaries need to be broken. And I think the profession needs to be liberated a little bit. Right. And I think it's a great time for architects to reclaim their profession, get back in the driver's seat, and be, master builders or master thinkers of an entire ecosystem, rather than the product that they're necessarily looking at.
So I've seen too few architects who are working in the corporate front from the client side, right? So I feel it's been a myth, because after speaking, not just speaking to them, even seeing what is going in the market, I feel there's a myth still there in the Indian market, thinking that if you're working from the client side or the corporate side, you will face a lot of challenges when it comes to your creativity, when it comes to your ideas, because it's very hard for to make a real estate developer or a builder to understand why we are taking such measurements or why we are taking such, energy efficient ways to go ahead with the design and everything. So do you think this is purely a myth, or do you feel there's still some challenges an architect faces when it comes to the corporate domain?
Firstly, I think there's a big difference between how architects are educated and what happens in the real world. And I think the onus is on architects to make sure that that gap is bridged by learning, doing, and so on and so forth, right? Yes, there are challenges, but those challenges are real challenges. Those are not, it's not because developers are evil and they don't want to be sustainable or, they will not listen to reason or science or things like that. I think these are real world problems which one has to come together and solve, right? And that challenge should be relished by the architect, not looked down upon by the architect. Now, I have myself transitioned to the client side, right? I have been lucky that, I have a patron in our owner promoter and our management that believes in these values. So that helps. But still, the doing of it needs to be demonstrated, right? And one has to connect all the dots. One cannot be sustainable at the cost of poor business happening, right? Or at the cost of bad.
Yeah, right.
Right. So you have to make sure all of these things are catered to. And I think architects have the skill set to design a win-win proposition if they apply their minds to it.
Agreed.
And it's not that they're lazy. I just feel like they don't tread on dimensions outside the sort of creative realm. And if they did a little bit, I think the bridges could be made better. I think we have come a long way, even in India, where the corporate side is very progressive, has been very encouraging. They realize that architects and designers add tremendous value. They respect architects and planners. And I think, the bridge has to be made from both sides.
Agreed. So at Godrej, what is the key mission that you particularly have for your vertical that you head?
So, like I said, I have now moved on to take on, more of a business role, which is the redevelopment of our lands in Vikhroli. Again, very fortunate that the trees is successful. So we are looking forward to building a city within a city, our maximum city of Mumbai. I also lead CSR and sustainability, which is very close to my heart. And that helps me because I'm able to try and do this in a conscious way. I'm empowered to make the machinery appreciate that in order to do business, we should do it in the most responsible fashion. Of course, the onus lies on me to be able to demonstrate that. Like I was saying earlier, that it cannot be at the cost of business. It cannot be at the cost of customer. It cannot be at the cost of anything. All of these things have to line up. It's been a great learning journey for me. I've been now with the company for about 8 years. I'm looking forward to, making it bigger and hopefully also achieve one of my own personal goals in that, to make a positive impact using my craft and my field to people's lives, right? At the end of the day, India is a developing country. We are a large company. We have about 150 million square feet of real estate across the country. And, I was just speaking with a team member and I was saying that, look, if we put one tap which is water efficient and let's say that tap saves so many liters of water every day, we are making so many homes. Imagine how many taps we will put and how much water we will save. Now, if I apply that analogy to the scale, right? I'd say it's a very satisfying or a very big difference that I can see myself contributing to. So,
and that definitely you can make one if you're working from the client side. Isn't that also one of the great
Yes,
advantage.
of course. Again, the client side is interesting in that, on the architecture side or design side, you do everything on paper, you conceive of it. Someone else is building it, someone else is, using it, and then it's kind of on the client side. You're part of the design, you're building it. Sometimes you're part of the use, whether you're managing the asset. So you get to see the entire life cycle. By virtue of seeing, you learn. You also have bits of it that you can control. So you can make sure that you take it to the last mile and it actually achieves its intended purpose.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been incredibly satisfying for me, over the last 8 years.
So,
And yeah.
so what keeps you inspired? Like, especially during this lockdown, what's been keeping you inspired to come up with new ideas or for the new projects or new townships?
I have a very young team that works with me, and I again very fortunate, and I learned this early on in my teaching days. I enjoyed teaching a lot simply because I was around very bright individuals who were at the forefront of new ideas. And as a professional, I always believe that you need to hire people who are better than you at things that you want to achieve as a team. So I'm very fortunate to have an amazing team, a young team, a bright team, a go-getter team. So they keep me inspired, and our conversations are, they're like workshops and charrettes, and I'll come up with an idea, and they'll say, no, that's rubbish. Here's a better idea. What do you think about it? So that is something that keeps me going. On the personal front, you know I like repurposing old things. I like restoring old things. I think somewhere in my head, I really, I'm an old soul or something, live in the past. So I restore vintage motorcycles. I like old things coming to life. And I will adaptively reuse them, stuff like that. um, I'm also, I like to write sometimes, so I'm working on a graphic novel. Right now, it has bits of research that I had done in graduate school on Delhi, so I pull in those things. So I like to connect dots from places which ordinarily won't connect, and build narratives and stories around it, and present it for people to enjoy.
I see your movie buff also. I see the w.r.t poster, I think.
Yes. So I happened to meet a guy. He's probably 90 years old, and he's probably the Bombay's only surviving hoarding painter.
Yeah, I've read about him. Yeah.
Right. So I happened to meet him, and we struck up an interesting friendship. And I said, "Rahman bhai, kuch mere liye bana do." So he asked me what. So I said, "Well, you've got to make me something, Amitabh Bachchan." And so yeah, he made me that poster.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
yeah, and there's inspiration everywhere in this country. It's insane. I mean, you turn the corner and there's inspiration if you're willing to look at it. So
So would I say that vintage things also inspires you?
yeah, a lot actually. But I like them to be purposeful. I don't like them to be just curios or something that is just for vintage value. So I will find, I will go searching. There'll be weekends where I will just say I'll go searching for something. Lately, I've been wanting an old gramophone and of a certain type, and it's been really hard to find. And finally, I found it, but the guy doesn't want to sell it yet. So I'm trying to, encourage him
Oh,
to sell it. So yeah, stuff like that.
nice. So, do you have any advice for the budding architects who are entering into this, and especially when they are planning to enter into the corporate side?
My advice is, we've covered some of this. I'd say, um, don't look at just designing buildings or whatever it is that you're designing. Take a step back. Look at it as a system approach. Look at it as a life cycle approach. Whatever you do as a creator is going to outlast your lifetime.
Right.
So make sure that you have thought about that. It is not something that was beautiful, you've published it, you've got an award for it, and fantastic, and it's the end of it, right?
Yeah.
um, I'd say go out and learn and educate yourself a little bit more. Um, Whether it's for the ability to get to see the life cycle and influence it,
Mm.
whether it's to understand markets and economics, whether it's to understand the customer, because again, architects tend to um, be very, like if I'm working with an architect, the architect would pretty much take my brief for granted and say, I've given the brief, I'm the client, right? Now, the interesting thing is both of us are building for the end user and customer,
Yeah.
right? If I haven't done my bit to make sure that I've engaged the customer, right?
Mm.
The architect needs to understand that. And sometimes developers may not be engaging the customer as much. So again, I would say they need to do this. Lately, there's a lot of, in the design fraternity, there's a lot of movement towards co-creation, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a good sign. Again, architects have mostly been very individualistic in their endeavor. They take pride in their style and so on. So I think to be team players, to pull in other creative people, to make the value chain richer, I think is something that will benefit them. Co-creation, even with customers, is something that's happening in various design fields. So I would say be open-minded. And lastly, I'd say it's a great time to be a creative person. Uh, you know, uh, Before this, I think it was the generation of uh, the engineer MBAs who were the analytical problem solvers.
Yeah.
Today, we are in the age of creative, innovative problem solving. And as a skill set, I think designers and architects have a natural advantage. So they can reclaim a lot of what was lost or what is lost in their profession. They can truly, like I was saying, become master builders, master thinkers. And definitely, I'd say put sustainability at the heart of your enterprise, because if we don't sustain, your whether it's your kids and your grandkids, what's the point?
Yeah. And so, what advice also you would give to the changes they can implement today to make a difference when it comes to the climate change catastrophe?
Um, for architects,
Yeah, for architects.
um, look, I think a lot of the basics are covered in the education, right? I think they need to have a grasp of how it really works to be able to then present it to clients, and to be able to actually make it happen in what they're doing.
Mm.
I find that a lot of architects are very are not bothered about the building once it's designed and published and handed over.
Mm.
It's the sort of non-sexy part of the work that once the building is in use,
Mm.
uh, there's no post-occupancy surveys. There is no telling if the building is really successful or not. If it got published, it's kind of successful. If you got a name for it because you made, even to make an argument to say that, look, the building was valued at 50 rupees and you did such a great job and today it's valued at 100 rupees, it's still a tangible return. So I think they need to see that, they need to capture it, they need to take some credit for it, and then they need to present it as a case study. It is something that I think the client side would really appreciate, right? You can see some architects that are very commercially savvy that clients love, right? So you learn that from them. Whether it's sustainability, then you figure out how the sustainability argument works efficiently,
Mm.
and then you present it to say that, look, your customers demanding it, your investors demanding it. If you don't build it, it's only 5% or 2% of the cost. This is how you can get break even on it.
Yeah.
So if they don't own parts of that equation, I think it's just giving out speeches and saying, well, there should be peace and goodwill on earth. Yeah, fine. We all agree to it, but how do you do it?
Agreed. And so what's next for you?
Well, I am, not neck but head deep in work. In the near term, we're going to hand over the third phase of the residential development of the trees. We finished it in record time of 2.5 years. Very excited. There's going to be about 850 families that are going to come to live there. I'm very keen to know from them what they think, what their quality of life is. So we have, detailed NPS surveys and exercises to know where we did well, where we didn't do well, so we can take those learnings to our next development. We are going to finish Godrej 2. Even before finishing it, we've already got Amazon and Maersk renting space. So again, somewhat of the myth that commercial office space is dying is debunked as a myth. People, I think, will still use offices if they are done right and if it's a place they want to be. We are right now working on our first 5-star hotel, Taj at the Trees, which will reach the plinth. There's a new beer garden that will come up at the Trees, which I'm very excited about. Outside of the Trees, we are looking at conceptualizing ideas around other lands which will come free in Vikhroli. And in the medium to longer term, looking at building a city within a city, which is a very rare privilege. So, like I said, I'm not neck but head deep in exciting work. So, fingers crossed.
That's great to know. And thank you so much, Anubhav, for coming in for the Design Story series. As I said, we have discussed more on the technical front, which I'm sure the viewers will know more, and I'm sure they will try to read more on this. You have been given us something very great to look upon, to understand, and I'm sure the budding architects will take a lot of advices from this particular series of ours.
No, thank you so much for having me, Kritika. And again, we believe in showing by doing, and we are no means experts or anything like that. We can only speak of what we've done and what has worked and what has not worked. So happy to be here, happy to share our experiences, and very happy to answer any queries or questions you may get from your viewers. And wanted to wish you the best for this series. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you.